All right, thank you for coming. This is the Skype Back to the Future session, so just making sure you're in the right room. My name is Delonda Coleman, and I'm a senior product manager on the Lync team, on the Lync marketing team, and I focus on our go-to-market strategy. And today I'm super excited to talk to you about Lync and Skype connectivity and what that means in the enterprise. So I'll talk a little bit about the mission of each of the brands and the benefits of them coming together. I've put together 5 business values that I think the combination of the two products bring. And these are pretty much, and then I'll also couple those with some scenarios and some examples. And finally, I'll try to take a look into the future in terms of what I think would be on the horizon next on the long-term vision, and in order for us to make our goals and our mission. Sound good? Is there anything anybody wants to cover or talk about in particular? Okay, just let me know. This is going to be fun and interactive, and there's a lot more on Lync and Skype connectivity. You can consider this sort of the introduction course, very broad, very high level. But we also are going to go deep, and we have some sessions repeated to make sure. So if anything interests you here today and you want to learn a little bit more, we have Lync and Skype connectivity, a practical guide, and that's going to be repeated twice. We also have App Center, Contact Center and the Attendee Console, and there's a part 1 and 2 series of that. There's Ask the Experts downstairs tonight and tomorrow. There's Making the Skype to Lync connectivity work. It's a very technical deep dive. And then finally, we have a technical deep dive on the Lync to Skype video. So today, I'll keep it high level, but there's tons of additional resources for you if you want to learn more about the two products coming together. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is sort of when two really great things come together, they rarely equal 3. Typically, these things are great in and of themselves, but when they merge together and they come together, they actually create something infinitely better than as they were individually. And these things start blending into the realm of each other and making each other much more greater. A great example that I like to give is the marriage between me and my husband. He was a great guy when we met, but I think he's starting to dress better, he smells better, he's just infinitely a lot better since we got married, in my opinion. So let me talk about sort of the missions of each of the products. I'll start with Skype. Skype's mission is to be the global communications provider that billions of people depend on every day. And I think they're really achieving that goal. Last summer, we celebrated 10 years anniversary with Skype, and I think all of you can imagine that a lot has happened in the last 10 years. I was reading this article in CNET, and it said that half of long-distance relationships actually depend on Skype in order to keep it going. And so that's a really impactful statement, and I think it's really a testament to Skype's impact in the consumer connectivity space, communication space. Lync's mission is very similar, but it's to connect people everywhere. And we feel like we're doing a really good job of achieving that. Of course, we're a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant in terms of unified communications. As Gurdeep mentioned in his keynote today, we're #1 line ships in terms of enterprise voice. And we just continue to see progress quarter after quarter from a revenue perspective, and our customers are validating that and giving us really good feedback. And there's tons of customer presentations today. So I really encourage you, if you don't take my word for it, go speak to one of our customers who are doing an awesome job in Lync. What's unique about these two things that are coming together is that, in the consumer world, you have folks who are now starting to use Skype as the basis for their communications, for either long-distance communications or as a small business or even as a large enterprise of wanting to connect out to small businesses they're using, and that experience is becoming really core. But when you go into the enterprise and you use Lync, that core experience that you're experiencing in the home environment is still the same experience that you can experience in the enterprise environment. And so it's nice that these two are coming together, and so those experiences are becoming ubiquitous. So what happens? And so now that these two things are together, I think what you'll continue to see us is continue to be people-centric. It's about billions of connections that we're making, not just the millions, but just billions. And then finally, it's about extending business value beyond the walls of your organization, and Lync being a gateway, Lync and Skype connectivity being a gateway for you to do that. We think video is a core experience of that, and so we support the H.264 SVC standard to enable high-definition video collaboration. And then we also take advantage of a vast network of partners to help us achieve that. So we have partners that help us enhance the experience through audio-video devices, USB devices, PCs, you name it. We have a partner to help us do it. And I think that's part of the unique value proposition for Microsoft. I'll talk a little bit about this. So what this means is that I know many of you went to the keynote this morning, and Gurdeep talked about our universal communications experience. We really see that Lync achieved its goal of being a unified communication platform with combining the experiences with IM, audio, video capabilities, web conferencing, enterprise voice into a single client, and we've achieved that. But now it's about really transforming that vision into something that's greater than just a unified experience, but a universal experience. And that universal experience means that when you're doing communications on a Microsoft platform, that the experience is going to be very familiar. So no matter if you're on your PC or if you're on your desktop or if you're on your phone, you're going to see something very similar and experience that. It also means when you go into other applications that experience is going to carry forward into the application. So if you want to do it if you want to have a communications experience, you can have it on Xbox, and then that experience can also be still embedded in an Office application or your Windows platform. So no matter where you are in the ecosystem, you can have that experience, and it'll be intelligent enough to understand where you've come from and and predict where you want to go. All devices. Gurdeep talked a lot about our platform ubiquity, and that we have seen significant success not only on the Windows platform, but on the iPhone, on Android. So we've seen significant success in those platforms, and we continue to believe that we want to be a communications provider regardless of the device that you're on. As I mentioned before, video is going to be a core experience to that, and so we believe that video really helps drive trust and confidence in the person receiving the video, and as well as the person presenting. And so we'll talk a little bit about some scenarios as I go along, but video will continue to be a core part of that. And finally, global reach through the cloud. So we have a cloud. We'll continue to invest in our cloud offering, and we will continue to see growth in there. So if you want to be on the cloud, we have a solution. Office 365, Gurdeep mentioned PSTN and Lync Online, and there's continuing innovation that's going to happen to enable global reach. All right, so what I want to walk through today is these 5 business values. I think the Lync and Skype connectivity can bring us 5 things. It's reach, agility and savings, relationships, and security. These are sort of the 5 promises that I think that I know that you can get as a result of the connection. So I'll dive deep into that. And before I continue, I know that a lot of you are interested in Lync and Skype connectivity, and some of you might actually been a lot farther along. Before my session, I made a call back to corporate, and I said, how many people have actually registered for this thing? And I know that there's about 10,000 organizations that have actually registered for Lync and Skype connectivity. So there's lots of interest and activity. So make this your session. If you have ideas and you want to talk about them, feel free to throw them back at me, and we can walk through them. All right, reach. This is really important, as I feel like reach is a method for us to really have a deeper connection with an infinite, well, a finite, because there's only so many people in the world, but certainly with more people. And one of our essence statements with Lync is about to enable people to go there without being there. And so now with the power of the Lync and Skype connectivity, there essentially gets a whole lot bigger. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. First, on the Lync enterprise side, 90% of the Fortune 100 companies are using Lync today in some capacity. And we know that 60% of enterprises in general have some plan to deploy Lync. And so there's a vast network of existing Lync users that can do there. From an enterprise perspective, with your really close and connected business partners, the Lync to Lync Federation is a great model for you to continue to have that trusted relationship with your partners. So as an example, if I work with a bank a lot to do to build out some of our stories, and we, instead of dialing a 1-800 number and joining a conference call, one of my partners, when he or she is available, I just send them an instant message, and we talk quite easily. And we know that each of our companies have our own security protocols, but now we have this trusted relationship where we can continue to talk. And quite often those conversations get escalated into a multi-party session, audio conferencing call, and then we also schedule video calls often. And so that's just one example. On the flip side, from a small business perspective, 99% of the organizations in the United States, as an example, are all small businesses. And those small businesses also want a solution to communicate with their advisors. Those small businesses want to connect back to large enterprises and have a connection and have a bridge to an organization. But they don't have an IT staff, or they don't even want to absorb a lot of the capabilities of Lync. And so a lot of them are currently using Skype today to do their communications. So I think one of the value propositions here is that, for these really small organizations who have 1 to 10 size staff, they could still continue to use Skype because it meets their needs, but have a really secure connection back to an enterprise that has Lync. The third side of this is that in terms of whether you're a large enterprise or a small business, both of them now have access to over 300 million connected users on Skype. So what that means is now that from a B2C perspective, they can start building connections, and a lot of them do it. I was sitting on the plane over there, and I'm one of the chatty people that talk to you when you want to go to sleep. And I met this woman who had a local business, and she was a consultant, and she was a specialist in her particular area. And I asked her, "Hey, do you use Skype?" "Oh, yes, of course. I use it every day to talk to some of my clients." And then she said, what was really interesting for her is that I was able to go international instantly because I had a conversation with a potential customer in Japan. And because she was able to do that video conversation, she was able to build that trust a lot easier because of that connection. And so that's just one of the examples of the benefit of that Lync and Skype connectivity. So being able to be local, but suddenly take your enterprise or your small business global with the vast network of connected users. The second thing that I want to talk about is agility. There's something to say about being nimble, about being able to quickly respond and engage someone very quickly, You want to be able to collaborate with multiple people and build consensus really quickly, and that can be easily accomplished as a result of the connection. Let me give you an example. This is an example of an employee in Seattle can connect back to her suppliers in London, and then be able to engage with her customers in Rio, for example. Now, mind you, there's some time warps and some time zone issues that they might have to deal with. But before, that might have to deal with her flying out to London and meeting with suppliers and having lots of conversations. She might have to actually engage someone who speaks Portuguese or speaks a different language in order to develop a go-to-market strategy. She might... But now, because of the connectivity, she's able to do that a lot quicker and engage a lot easier. Here's one example that I'd like to talk about. This is Amanda. She's a product engineer, and she uses Lync. She is developing some cutting-edge products for her company, and she really, she often runs into a problem. So she connects back to her professor who's an expert in this area, that she remembers she had a class with him, and she connects back with him. And he's able to tell her, here's some of the stuff that we've learned, here's some of the current research in our innovation center that's going on. We actually have a team of people, and she's able to connect back with them on Skype in the innovation center in a different state. Her boss, Sarah, who is the head of product development, could then connect back after Amanda's learned those things, and but she's in another location. She's actually in the headquarter office, and they can actually have a conversation, a secure conversation about Lync, about her product and how to make some changes after she's learned some information. And so that's just one example of how product design and development can happen beyond just the walls of your organization. And being able to have a connection with somebody extended and bring in experts from outside of the organization to really have some conversations about whatever the issues they're going through. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Savings is a easy one. I think it's obvious, like when, these are some core value propositions that we talk about Lync, and, I'll go over them. But there's certainly a reduced need for travel. You don't have to travel as much. That's, check that box. There's also could be a reduced need for real estate space. One of the cool things, I don't know, has anyone been down to the Expo Center and seen the workspace designs that we have? If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to check it out. We actually have some workspaces down there that are designed for the needs of the mobile employees and to foster more collaboration. So, for example, like the Lync room systems, we can design huddle spaces that people can get together really quickly and huddle and deploy a Lync room and leverage a Lync room system. And so you can actually, if you think about redesigning your workspace, you can reduce some of your real estate requirements. There's some reduced IT administrative costs with having a single solution. So rather than piecemealing many different vendor solutions, the one system makes it easier to administer and monitor the system. And of course, with that is that reducing some legacy and redundant costs. So if you have if you're using WebEx, for example, you can reduce those costs with leveraging WebEx, and then you could reduce costs of using communication systems. And then obviously with all these things, there's just a soft benefit of increasing time, and because time is money. So you'll start to see productivity increasing a lot. One aspect of the savings that I really want to talk about is people. And we're talking about really investing in your people, as people are the most valuable resources. And so a lot of people kind of ask me, how do I leverage Lync and Skype to really bring others into the organization. One thing that we like to talk about is this remote interviewing. So now enabling, instead of flying candidates in to interview, you can actually leverage Skype and Lync as an interview solution. It's funny, I recently was on an interview looking for candidates, and because of the snowstorm, we couldn't make it out to the East Coast. So we decided to have all the interviewees that couldn't make it. We did all the interviews in Skype. And so we can continue to see that we can look for the best talent, and we can also infinitely expand our search. So if those target schools aren't the right search, we can continue to look for more candidates in other demographics, for example, is a key example. Once you bring in the best and the brightest talent, you want to be able to effectively train them and give them the best resources that you have. But if they're all in remote locations, you can still do that through Lync and be able to deploy training through the Lync technology, as opposed to having someone all coalesce at a single location. The other thing that's been really popular is enabling flexible work styles and flexible arrangements. So instead of having employees come to work and have a butt in the seat, many of them have personal issues or childcare arrangements that they need to take care of, or just family challenges, or some of them can't sell their house and they can't physically move to the corporate location. So why turn away that employee if you have a really good expert? Enable flexible work styles and flexible arrangements through Lync is totally possible. And then connecting with family, enabling sort of that connection while employees who are on the road, enable them to move those calls to Skype or to Lync to enable them to still connect back with their family and see their family while they're on the road. And you can take those roaming charges and the data charges off and move that to the internet. Does that make sense? Any questions? Cool. All right. Another cool scenario is that people have been really excited is this call us via Skype. So imagine Livia, she's a banking customer, she's home, she actively uses Skype to connect with her family and friends, but she's also a banking customer and she's looking for a new bank or a new solution. Traditionally, what she'll go to the website, and maybe if she's interested in talking to someone, they'll have a feature such as like chat with us, or they'll have some 1-800 number. Or what I've been noticing a lot of corporations doing is really hiding the 1-800 number. But what a great opportunity what if you were able to ditch the 1-800 number and have her contact you via Skype. Now, what that means is now you have her contact information, meaning her Skype contact information. She can choose how she wants to engage with you. Does she want to send you a text? Does she want to send you or have an audio conversation with someone? Or if it's really urgent and important and it's something that she really wants to look someone in the eye, she can decide if she wants to have a video chat collaboration. And I think that's a really unique scenario that can bring a lot of value to the organization. Now imagine the bank representative who's on Lync, and now she can have a video conversation with her. I was traveling, once I studied abroad in London, and I had to open a bank account in London in order to do a transaction with the largest banking institution in London. But I had to travel back home, and I needed to access my money in London. A great scenario for me would have been because I was a student, I can't, it's difficult for me to make long distance calls to London. It would have been awesome if I would have been able to talk to someone via the video collaboration and if I just Skype them, rather than having to remember their phone number, remembering the time difference and all the complications that go along with that. It would have been cool if we could have just clicked to call that banking institution. having said that, there's a definite benefit in building relationships. There's an advantage to being human and to having more natural, nuanced conversations with a particular customer. And you can engage with them on a variety of devices, and that relationship can mean that I can connect with someone on an iPhone and I be on an Android phone and build that relationship regardless. I don't have to be on the same platform in order to have a conversation, and that's really key. One example that we like to talk about is having this dedicated advisor. If you want to have a relationship with a customer that's more one-on-one and requires nurturing. So a dedicated advisor, this is Nick. He's a small business owner, and he has been assigned a dedicated advisor from his bank. And so now through the federation between the two clients, he can be on Skype, but he can see the presence and availability of his dedicated advisor. So now when Vic has a question about some of his investments, he can connect directly back to the bank and talk about that, and if his advisor is available, and vice versa. If the advisor has a new product that he wants to talk to Nick about, he can connect back with him. And that's sort of the real benefit. Some other cool things that we've been talking about is the Lync or the bots. So if his dedicated advisor isn't available, now you can integrate bots into the equation where they can figure out scheduling on behalf of the dedicated advisor. So Vic can say, he can see his presence not available. The bot can say, hey, we have these openings available. Which one do you want to select? He types in Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and the bot sends a confirmation to him, confirmed. We'll make sure that your dedicated advisor speaks to you then. So those are some of the cool scenarios that I think are really transforming. The other thing is about really connecting a customer to other experts in your organization. So now he's getting older, and he wants to talk about retirement solutions. His dedicated advisor can connect him to other experts in the organizations really quickly and efficiently. VIP experience is sort of the next evolution or example of that. You can give your customers, many of you, if you're collecting data about your customers, you know their habits on an aggregate level. You can determine what products make sense for which segment or target of customers. And then you can tailor solutions based on their buying habits or their purchasing or their saving habits. So one example that we like to talk about is there's a lot of banks are really doing really cool things where they're re-engineering their retail locations, and they're giving their customers devices and having the customers do transactions on their devices while in the bank, creating really modern, cool spaces for the customers to feel engaged in. But what can also happen is really integrating with your CRM or your sales applications or your ERP applications. If you've already gathered that intelligence about the customer, you can actually embed communications experiences within that. So if the customer comes into the bank with a unique solution, the ERP application triggers notification to personal bankers that are physically in the bank. And they can say, Thomas is in the bank. He's actually doing a transaction. We think the following services are best suited based on what we know about him. Do you want to engage him now? And I can send a communication back to Thomas on the device. Hey, Thomas, we have a personal banker who's here, who's ready to talk to you about such and such. We noticed XYZ about you. And so those are really interesting things where you think about, if you're thinking about re-engineering your processes, you can actually embed communications experiences into those, and that be a gateway for you to really engage and interact with your customers. I've been talking a lot about banking, but these experiences also extend into retail or many other industries. So one example is personal shopping. Tina is looking for a wedding dress. She can't physically go to another location. There's this particular brand, and store that she wants to shop at, but she doesn't want to go. So she can call the retail location. They can assign her a personal shopper, and that personal shopper can talk to her about the dress options, make options for her to come into the store, or they can build a relationship and she can send her the things that she wants to do after the purchase. So those are some of the examples of how relationships really matter. And if you want to give a more connected experience, you can give a more higher touch to certain people, certain segment of your consumer base. The last thing that I want to talk about is security. Now, security has been people always ask, is it secure to do this? And so I wanted to really touch upon is that the connectivity between the two is there, and it really gives the confidence for your users to be able to communicate on their own devices in whatever scenario or context that they're in. But most importantly, for the IT professional, it really gives them the confidence that their IP is secure, and that's a core tenet that we have. So as I mentioned, someone can be at home in their home office on Lync, and they can still talk to someone in the retail store, in the venue, on a Skype hotspot, for example, because those conversations are secure. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but because some of my colleagues will do a double click on these topics a little later, but from authentication to access control to authorization, encryption, and compliance, there's tons of enterprise-grade security options that you, as the enterprise owner, can control with that experience with Lync and Skype. The additional thing that I want to mention is the reporting and monitoring tools that are embedded within Lync natively. So these things come out of the box with Lync. You're able to monitor how many users, how long did they speak, what's the quality of the conversation, what node on your network is causing problems in the conversation so you can remediate that. And it also gives you insight to the customers. And so what kind of experience are my customers getting when they're talking on Skype with us, and if there's issues that we need to resolve or insight that we can gain from that. So those are the 5 business values, very high level, but those are just some core examples of us being able, with the Lync and Skype connectivity, to be able to extend beyond your enterprise, be very nimble in terms of how quickly you're able to engage and respond. There's some core savings that we think you could immediately benefit from, as well as some relationships that you can continue to build with not only your customers, but your partners, and finally, security. So I'll pause there before I start talking about the future, but any reactions, questions?
One question on the security side, I noticed there's been a lot of movement around this area, is can you listen to someone's conversation?
Can you listen to someone's conversation in Lync? I'm not familiar with that. I'm not sure. I think is your question more about how deep, is your question around the NSA, or is your question around?
It's around where two parties connect in an enterprise level in the company.
Ah, okay.
And can that conversation be listened to?
I'm not positive on the specifics if someone like a third party could be listening to it, but I do know that internally, or a third party to the conversation to be listening to it. But what I do know is that as a company, you can set those specific security policies in terms of what types of communication can happen by user. So if you want the conversations archived so that you can have a trail of the text messages, or you want a timestamp, or you can get that granular in terms of how much control you want. You can also, like for example, Lync to Lync Federation. If you only want 10 people in your organization to be able to talk to another organization, you can set that policy. So not everyone in the organization is exposed to that risk if that's a high concern.
Is there federation available between Lync Online and Skype?
Yes. It comes native. It's automatically turned on once you become a Lync Online customer.
We have the situation with Skype.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have to send them over the DSL line. It's just a mess, because we don't have Link Edge. So I could just give them Link Online accounts and have them do Link Online and Skype.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of doing that. All they would need to know is the Skype ID of the potential candidate. Yeah. Hi.
So, under the cover, Lync uses different codec than Skype. Skype uses Silk. So, there's a codec mismatch. So, where does the transcoding happen?
That's a perfect question for one of my colleagues. There's actually a technical deep dive on that very topic. So, I would just they'll better answer the question than I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what session is that?
Yeah, I can show you the sessions. There's a session tomorrow that's going to be repeated on Lync and Skype connectivity, a practical guide. And I've seen the presentation. It's
Technical deep dive, it says?
yeah, there's two sessions. There's a practical guide that's more high level, and then there's the deep dive technical guide that talks about both. So I encourage you to check out those sessions. I've seen the presentations. Your question will be answered, but I want you to talk to the experts.
All right.
Any other questions? Yeah.
When it was introduced last year, the Lync integration with Skype had three integrations. One was video,
Mhm.
there is video as well.
Yeah.
The other one was that it was just one-to-one conversations, not meetings.
Yeah.
Is it meetings now, or just still one-to-one?
Right now it's one-to-one, but we'll continue. You know, the intention is that the integration is going to continue to get better. So desktop sharing, multi-party connectivity, and meetings is on the road, is on the plan.
And another one was that it was required that the Skype user was using the Microsoft account,
Mm-hmm.
not the Skype ID. Is it still the case?
That still exists. Yes. Yes.
So what's the roadmap? On today's keynote, kind of heard Wade said, okay, the video will start working soon. So what's the timeline?
By the summer. The timeline for the Lync to Skype connectivity is this summer.
Summer.
Yes.
So that could be 6 months. Yeah.
The summer of 2014. That's all they tell me, above my pay grade.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. I do want to do something cool to show you a video about how, in the our Microsoft's vision of all these things coming together. I'll show you. I'll show it a quick example of a manufacturing of how a manufacturing company, if we really truly re-engineer our processes, embed communications into the process. Here's an example of our Microsoft's vision of this actually playing out in manufacturing. So just to give you some context, this is a BMW. They're a car. Obviously, they manufacture cars, and they're looking into the performance of a particular seat. Identified an opportunity to actually improve the performance of a seat through changing the materials within the seat. So someone has identified a project, and now he's scheduled a meeting with his team to talk about the project. About the meeting is that they're able to take notes and use whiteboards, and that automatically becomes part of the project. So your context won't really change. The application knows what's going on. doctor can talk to someone in Asia, and they can have a conversation with each other through the video collaboration. They're also keeping context in terms of who the person is, what tier of supplier they are, and where they're located. Now this is transitioning into the actual manufacturing plant, where if something goes wrong in the process, the machine can actually send through Lync a message notifying that something is wrong. Now, she walks to the machine, recognizes the equipment, and she actually tells it to schedule downtime and replace the valve, and the machine responds to her. Now, the application can actually send a notification back to the supplier, and they can know that something is wrong. And so now they're able to look into their processes and fix the problem. What's cool is he's sitting at home on his television, and he can actually order the parts, this new seat, from home using the television, and using an application in the television that sends a communication back to the dealer, and he picks up his car. So that's one example of that actually playing out, and that's how we kind of see the vision of this communications embedded processes, re-engineering the processes, and Lync actually being a gateway or a hub for you to do all these really cool things across your value chain and across your ecosystem. The other thing that I want to talk about is interpretation and translation services. So if our goal is to be a global communications provider, a small nuance about being global is that you have to be able to speak to people, and sometimes in a language that you don't understand. Today, Lync does some really cool things. So we have, using the Bing translation service or translation services, I am a colleague in another country, and I'm able to do that in English, and he or she can read the IM in Spanish, which is really cool. Bing has also now released the speech-to-speech translation, so I see that as something that's going to, Skype being a target scenario where you'll start to see speech-to-speech translations embedded into the communications experience. And then Xbox and the Connect technology is actually doing some really cool things with sign language and translation. So I'll show you a research from Microsoft, a video from Microsoft Research.
A sign language translator. It translates from one sign language to another. It helps the hearing and the deaf communicate.
你喜欢西雅图的天气吗?
You can communicate between American Sign Language and Chinese Sign Language, or potentially any sign languages to any other natural language.
The Connect will capture the sign language and then recognize the meaning of the sign language, including the posture, the trajectory, and then there's an automatic translation into spoken language.
我很喜欢这个. I really like this.
The basic modes are a translator mode and a communication mode. And the translator mode is just showing how single words can be translated from a sign into a written form, or how to translate a written form into a sign. In communication mode, we can actually use a translation of full sentences. The avatar is used in the system to represent the hearing person doing signing.
How about our system?
It's a proxy for the hearing person.
It helps me to connect with others.
你好.
Imagine a deaf person walking into a doctor's office. The doctor is a regular doctor, probably can't speak in sign language.
Hello, my name is Dr. Wang. What is hurting you?
But the patient wants to communicate with the doctor. Today they'd have to use maybe writing, and it would be very artificial. But here with this technology, they could use signing, and the doctor would be able to understand that signing. So another scenario is an information kiosk, say at an airport.
Hello, How can I help you?
And rather than, say, the person seeking information at that kiosk being deaf, imagine if the person at the information kiosk was deaf.
Which way is the taxi stand?
Now a hearing person could come to that kiosk and ask questions of the deaf person, and the system could help them communicate with the deaf person and vice versa.
Please go outside the terminal and make a left.
Great, thank you.
So one of the things that we're doing with this project is working with the deaf community directly. We're working with a school in China for the deaf. And they've helped us understand better that there's quite an isolated feeling in being deaf, even today. What overwhelmingly you feel when you see it working is a certain magic, but you know that there's more work to do, but you can see the potential there, that one day this is going to be something that is going to transform lives.
So that's some of the innovation that's going on in terms of translation and interpretation services. And those are current, as I mentioned, there's some things that are currently native to the product where you can currently do some translation if you want to do IM. But you can imagine if you really want to develop a bridge or a connection with someone, being able to speak in a native language and hear it in any language that you want to hear it, is really cool, whether you be deaf or whether you're speaking in just a different language. One example that I like to bring up is the European Parliament. They're a 750-member organization, and they speak over 24 official languages. And they have a culture of you being able to speak in whatever language of your preference is, and they'll translate that into something so that the constituents can hear. At any given time, it requires the services of at least 380 interpreters to handle that bandwidth. And during peak times, it will need interpreters of over 100. And you can imagine translating those transcripts into all those different languages across the European Union is pretty complex. And so one scenario that I think is really cool is the ability to now webcast to tens of thousands of constituents in their native language. And so they can actually hear the proceedings or the laws being actually crafted in their own languages. And, and they can be able to connect and participate in the legislative process as opposed to being disenfranchised or being disconnected because of the time it takes to translate. So that's it. Those are just some of the futuristic examples that I think are really pushing the boundaries, and those are some of the things that are probably going to happen in the future between Lync and Skype. All right. Cool. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Well, I encourage you to check out my colleagues' sessions if you guys want to go deeper. Cool. Thank you.